Moon versus Moon. Wells versus Verne. Note: this review will work best if you have read or listened to audiobooks of both novels. Greetings, dear listeners. Some of you may remember that way back in February of 2022, I invited you all to read along with me two classic early science fiction novels, From the Earth to the Moon by Jules Verne, and The First Men in the Moon by H.G. Wells. Spoiler alert! The astronauts in the Verne novel don't actually make it to the moon, but end up in orbit around it, and so he had to write a second novel, which is called Round the Moon or All Around the Moon. I suggested that we read that book as well. It was my intention to produce a video reviewing both books, but it never happened. I wish to apologize to all of you who read both books and were awaiting my comments. I will give them here and now. At the time I first suggested we read both Verne and Wells, I provided 4 questions for you to consider while perusing the books. As I didn't want to pull questions off the net, I made up my own. They weren't great questions, but I thought they'd do in a pinch to get discussion going. Here they are. 1. Which novel did you like the best? Why? 2. What did you think of the use of technology in the novels? What did they get right? Did they get anything right? 3. Did you notice any social commentary in the novels? If so, how did you feel about it? And 4. Which novel do you think would make the best cinema? I'm going to start with question 2 about the use of technology. What did they get right? Short answer? Not a lot. In From the Earth to the Moon, the 3 aeronauts or astronauts, President Barbicane of the Baltimore Gun Club, Major Nichol, and Michel Ardan, travel in a giant cylinder fired from a huge gun situated in Florida. Verne explains at some length why Florida was chosen, after a comical competition with Texas, complete with firearms, why Florida was chosen, and those points must be scientifically valid, as we are still launching rockets from Florida today. In The First Men in the Moon, the protagonist encounters an eccentric experimenter who invents a metal that can resist gravity, something that has never happened yet. They use the metal to fabricate a sphere which takes them to the moon, where they encounter the lunar inhabitants, the Selenites. Well, if there are Selenites on the moon, we haven't met them yet, so the novel is not very accurate scientifically. The structure of the Verne novel matches the pattern of all his other science fiction works. Some dramatic scenes to provide story and to move the action along, interspersed with long scientific lectures. Such lectures are delivered in the form of a scientific expert, in this case either President Barbicane or Major Nichol, explaining various astronomical or mathematical concepts to a layperson, in this case the comic Frenchman Michel Ardan. I remember reading the Verne books back when I was in grade 6 or 7, and science-minded, so I would have found those sections a lot more interesting than I do now. When I was tempted to skip over them, to focus on the book's adventure elements. Next question. Did you notice any social commentary in the novels? If so, how did you feel about it? Short answer, yup. Wells was a lifelong socialist, so one would naturally expect to find some political commentary in his works. But Verne also provides us with what might be best described as social satire. The opening scene of From the Earth to the Moon is hilarious. As the American Civil War had just ended, the members of the Baltimore Gun Club are lamenting the fact that, with peace, they will no longer be able to build and fire cannon and other artillery pieces. The humor lies in the physical description of the disgruntled members. Many are missing arms and legs, blown off in the war. It should be macabre, but their lugubrious laments gives the scene a comic vitality. In the end, the solution to their discontent is to fire a huge cannonball at the moon, a cannonball which will eventually become a huge cylinder containing the 3 lunar explorers. Jules Verne seemed to have had mixed feelings about Americans. While he often sings their praises and refers to them in sentences, such as the following partial quote, "The Yankees, the first mechanicians in the world, are engineers by right of birth." End of quote. But in spite of such admiration, Verne also seems to see the Americans as prone to violence and even murder. As a result, he introduces a civilizing European influence in the form of Michel Ardan, a semi-comical Frenchman who prevents the rivals, President Barbicane, I got it right that time, not Barbicane, President Barbicane and Major Nickel from killing each other, and then convinces them to join him inside the projectile the gun club fires at the moon. While I found the Michel Ardan character mildly amusing, my favorite character was the gun club's enthusiastic secretary, J.T. Marsden, who has hook hands and a gutta percha cranium from his wartime activities, which included developing a mortar which accidentally blew up, killing 337 people. Marsden is prone to shouting, "Hurrah!" before stuffing his mouth with sandwiches. You try that sometimes. Try saying, "Hurrah!" with your mouth full of sandwich. So I preferred Marsden to Michel, which leads me to my favorite character from The First Men in the Moon, the eccentric scientist Cavour. The protagonist of The First Men in the Moon is one Bedford, a young man with unrealistic expectations and rather flexible morals, who is trying to get out of bankruptcy by writing a successful play. Yes, you heard that right. A stage play. Bedford suffers from writer's block and finds his musings interrupted by a funny little man who makes annoying buzzing sounds. Cavour. Bedford makes his acquaintance and soon learns that Cavour is attempting to make a metal capable of resisting gravity. Instantly grasping the commercial possibilities of such an invention, Bedford inflicts himself on Cavour as a partner, only to have the scientist talk him into exploring commercial opportunities on the moon. That's right, commercial opportunities on the moon. The pair travel to the moon in a sphere made of the weightless metal, dubbed Carverite. Wells's moon is a place of fantasy. It has dense vegetation, moon calves, and selenites. Selenites, an insect-like race of beings that live inside the moon and which are clearly based on communal insects such as ants and bees. The other thing the pair discover on the moon is pure gold. Gold, lots of it. The First Men in the Moon has been described as a critique of British colonialism, and there is plenty of evidence for that interpretation. The explorers first encounter the selenites by attacking them while stoned out of their mind, the result of eating some moon fruit. Taken prisoner, they escape, Bedford killing a number of the moon people in the process. The pair become separated, and Bedford makes his return to Earth alone, bearing with him 2 crowbars and some chains made out of the pure, heavy gold. The abundant gold makes Bedford plan to return to the moon, this time with men and guns, but an accident, a young boy causing the sphere to take off for outer space, with him in it, puts an end to Bedford's plans. The final section of the book presents a number of wireless messages from Cavour, now a captive of the moon people, in which he describes the selenites and their society, which is as regimented and specialized as a society of insects. Wells seems to admire this form of social organization for its logic and efficiency, while at the same time his basic humanity, as expressed through the character of Cavour, is repulsed by it. In the end, spoiler alert, the selenites kill Cavour to stop his communications with the Earth when they learn of mankind's capacity for violence and war. Thus, Wells' novel ends on a final note of social criticism. I will now return to my first question. Which novel did you like the best? Why? On my first reading, I liked the Verne novel better. There is a sunny Victorian optimism about the story which I found incredibly appealing in these sour times of ours. But on my second reading, I found I enjoyed the Wells book more for its social and political criticisms. But what about you, dear listeners? Which book did you like best? Final question. Which film would make the best cinema? Back in the day, they made movies of both From the Earth to the Moon in 1958 and The First Men in the Moon in 1964. I saw them both as a kid, but I don't remember much about either of them. If you have seen both these films, which one did you like the best? If you haven't seen either of them, which story do you think would make the better movie? So, dear listeners, please share your thoughts on the above questions and any other opinions you'd care to share in the comments below. Once more, I apologize for having taken so long to produce this video. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here. That's PX Here, while the music was Space Fighter Loop by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.